again, just from reading what's been happening in the last 2-3 years, whenever some of these Islamist groups are being hit by whomever, I think those who hit, they know that they will expect to be hit again. And in fact, it practically always happens. What I'm trying to say is that while in the past the United States and Israel did whatever it did with the Arabs, and some Arab individuals gave speeches and wrote things, it just went unanswered. Now, just from observing what's happening in the media, and what the media is saying is that, for example, if Hamas is hit, Israel knows that Hamas is going to react. If Hezbollah is hit, they know that Hezbollah is going to react. And it's actually the ongoing things right now. So there is a tendency more to take individual Islamist groupings more seriously than Arab.
But I'm asking the specific question, which I think Americans are interested in. The World Trade Tower was bombed. Pennsylvania Avenue has been closed. We have security in Washington that seems to escalate year by year, nothing like when you and I first came here to Washington. What I hear being said around this table is that the die has been cast, the direction is more of the same, and that we should expect more challenge, more confrontation, more terror in the future.
Well, I think that depends on very much on the aggressive policies that have been set into motion. Judging from these aggressive impulses in the Middle East, it's Israel that is attacking southern Lebanon. It is the United States that is beginning to harass and jail Islamic activists as a corollary to the Israeli policies. And so if these are going to continue, and there's no reason to believe that they are going to diminish given what we have, we hope that there is someone can pull a rabbit out of the hat here. But short of that, the retaliations are going to continue in Lebanon, in the occupied territories, and we will not see, if Sheikh Omar Abdul Rahman continues to be put behind bars and is harassed according to the news that we are receiving, then we'll probably see an escalation because the Egyptian incidents have been going through cycles. They reach a peak and then they simmer down a little, and then they reach another higher peak and then they simmer down a little, and this has been going. And also the upheaval in Algeria. Now, if we take this we put Hamas into context. Hamas happens to be at the center of these Islamic activities: Algeria, Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt, Central Asia, Chechnya, the Balkans,
Saudi Arabia as well?
The Arabian Peninsula altogether, etc. These are bursts of Islamic attempts at Islamic self-determination. And Hamas happens to be, Islamic Jihad happen to be at the center of this, they are the epicenter of this Islamic reinstatement. So when you come and you target a person who is almost at the center of Hamas itself, that is sending out signals to the rest of the Muslims that the United States is hostile. The United States is taking an aggressive position against us. The United States is more Israeli than the Israeli government. Let me just throw this out. Back in the late 1960s, Hilarion Capucci, a religious Christian religious figure, was caught by the Israelis, and he had arms in the trunk of his car. They took him to court. They convicted him. They didn't throw him behind bars. They sent him to the Vatican. And then the Vatican reassigned him to Latin America. Now, Sheikh Omar Abdul Rahman had no arms in his home. He had no car. He can't even go from one room to the other without someone assisting him. And then they come and they say he's responsible for some type of master scheme to blow up certain landmarks in New York City. And what do? They don't have the courtesy to be as kind as the Israeli government. The U.S. government, Clinton, and his administration, I think Clinton should register as a foreign agent for the government of Israel. Clinton and his administration throw this person behind bars. I mean, they should take a leaf out of Israeli history. They should take a chapter out of Israeli contemporary affairs. At least send the person to Afghanistan or Sudan or Iran or somewhere. Be respectful of him.
But I think his question, I don't believe there's any problems going to happen in the United States, even if he's sent. I don't think the Muslim community in the United States...
You don't think there will be any problem?
I don't think in the Muslim community in the United States or the Arab community in the United States will take any adversary action in the United States, because the Muslim community and the United States and the Arab community is mature enough to know better this is not the way to deal with it, and that's not, even with the all beliefs that the Clinton administration is a hostile administration to the Arab interests and the Palestinians and the Muslims, but the Muslim community knows that there is democracy here, and Clinton is not president forever, and things would change, and that's one of the reasons I would believe that there is nothing will happen in this country.
You mean Senator Bob Dole, the senator from Israel who wants to move the embassy to Jerusalem?
But this not is going to be to the point that they're going to doing everything anti-Islamic, because at one point or another I believe there's going to come time when they realize that their interest is going to come. But that might create more radical people or more, uncompromising people, and enforces the idea in the Muslim world, the Muslim people around the world and the Arab people around the world that, to give up on America, and which is not exactly what Israel wants. They want the people to give up on America as a friendly country, and then they can have it all to them, and they can manipulate it, which is they're doing now, as they wish.
Very friendly to be.
But, yeah, I think they already have it all to them, and that I think we should expect more continuity, whether it's Clinton or Dole. It really doesn't matter who the personality is. It matters what the balance of power in the Middle East is, and as long as the balance of power remains what it is, we're going to see the same kind of continuation of the old policies.
Isn't something also being unsaid here? That moderate, reasonable people like you, who hold leadership positions in the Muslim and Arab American communities, may well be pushed out by the more radical kinds of people that you just mentioned, if these kinds of tensions continue to grow.
That everything could happen in politics, as we know. There's nothing impossible. But the point that we have to say what we believe is right. And every person got to say and stand for what he or she believes is the right thing to do, whether for the organization or for the people that he's trying to lead. And in my point of view, and I believe in the change that will come, and we have to work harder at it, and we have to organize ourselves as Muslim communities and Arab communities and take advantage with the coalition with the American people. From my own experience, and I believe the American people are good-hearted people. They are uninformed about the causes that's going on, because the media that's concentrating and brainwashing them to the point that that everything is Arab and Muslim is associated with terrorism, and everything Israeli is associated with with victory and glory. And these things don't go forever. Things change. Even the America is going to change. Its political structure is going to change as far because of the economics. Economics change over the years, and things is going to change. And I think we have to keep working and be ready when the changes go in, that we are there to fill in the vacuum, not leaving it to people like we were talking about. They are not going to represent the interest of the Muslim community or the Arab community.
Yeah, but I think it's I'm sorry. I think that the one way in which the Arab and Muslim communities might be able to affect change is if they can amass more power in their hands, and the only way to do that is to link themselves with their like-minded elements in the Middle East. If they just think of themselves as Arab Americans and Muslim Americans, they're not going to get anywhere. But they have to be working hand in hand with the people over there who are opposing these policies, and that's the only way that anyone's ever going to take their opposition seriously.
I think it's more important that they link with each other here, and I think that's been the real problem. Earlier, Mark asked the question, or made the observation that the Zionist lobby was extremely effective compared to their numbers. The numbers of the Arabs and the intersection of Arab Americans and Muslim Americans is certainly greater than that number, and yet we're totally ineffective. And I think that will remain to be the case until the Arab Americans and Muslim Americans recognize an identity of interests in the same way that the Zionists have.
But on top, it's not either or really. It's what Laura said, what you said, but just as important, if not even more important, to create coalitions within this country itself. Mm-hmm. I think Arab Americans, Muslim Americans had, because of experience, had a natural ally, I believe, with the African American community in this country. Unfortunately, the leaders of this community of ours did not approach this issue properly, rightly, because of experiences. African Americans having been placed at the bottom by and large of the socioeconomic ladder and ethnic ladder, and us too. I think there is a natural alliance in the works in there. But our leaders, our community leaders did not take advantage of this, and I think it would be very important to improve things in this country to precisely create coalitions with like-minded, like-experienced people who have gone through the same experiences as we did, Native Americans, African Americans, Hispanics, even women.
You're absolutely right.
Not even, forgive me, but including women.
You're absolutely right, but we can't form those alliances until we become allied with one another.
But that's what I said.
There's something else
that Laura said is correct. What you said is correct, but in addition to.
I think we also have to add that it seems to me events are racing ahead at a very fast pace. That it's nice for thoughtful, highly educated people who have an opportunity once in a while to go on TV and write articles in journals and, publish their op-eds in newspapers, and we can thoughtfully analyze the situation and thoughtfully discuss how to make things better and what we need to do and what justice requires. But the pace of events seems to be moving at a very, very fast clip, and I think the direction we're on is one of conflict and confrontation. I don't think any of us would be surprised if groups in the Middle East started taking American hostages. We wouldn't be surprised if American embassies were blown up. We wouldn't be surprised if the other side of the White House was closed off to traffic. And under these circumstances, other forces that aren't represented at this table and that represent groups and interests that none of us are part of seem to have the upper hand and seem to have set the direction that all of us are on, and it would be somewhat dishonest if we didn't acknowledge that collectively we're quite impotent other than our ideas. I think everyone around this table is an expert on the Middle East and in most cases about what's happening in this country, and yet the direction that we're all set on is not one that's been represented in the last few minutes. We've been talking about hope rather than despair, and my own view is that few of the things we've discussed here are going to keep pace with the negative confrontational elements that have been set in place. Dr. Abu Marzouk representing what you call this challenge, that the Americans for the first time have been drawn in now by the Israelis to declaring the Islamic movement the enemy. And only in the last 2 years, correct me if I'm wrong, has the United States arrested and imprisoned and charged anyone who was part of the Islamic national movement. Now that course is set. New legislation, won't it make it, the new legislation make it very difficult for you to fundraise, for your own groups to fundraise now? Sure. You said people are repressed, not coming to the mosques, not willing to speak up.
Mark, before even anybody answers, I don't want to leave the impression that the one side, as you said, of the White House was closed due to any Arab or Islamic action, and you didn't mean that, obviously. I think
the general threat of terrorism.
But you know the history of that. It was a report, a leak, apparently what we learned later from Mossad to the FBI, that a Libyan death squad crossed from Canada the United States.
And it was really a CIA group that came here to train them, right?
And then we learned also that this whole was an invention of somebody, and so there was really no such action.
No, it wasn't just an invention. It was actually a CIA operation that brought Libyans to the United States to train them for a revolution in Libya. But nevertheless, it was closed because of the possibility of domestic terror or international terror. But we've had quite a conversation here. Let's try to wrap it up. I'll give each of you an opportunity to just say what your own conclusions are.
Well, let me start with this. I guess, coming from my beliefs as a Muslim, a devout Muslim, and we are obliged to do whatever we can, that we see that's right. But if the results sometimes are not there, but God is always there. And I believe even some of the things that the Israel is doing, with the help of the Clinton administration, in many instances I see that work to the best interest of the Islamic movements. And all what we have to say, I think, as American Muslims, I believe that we have the interest of the country at heart, more than the Zionist, I guess. I believe in that. The country's interest here in America, it's not to be 100% with Israel. It's to have at least, the least of it is even-handed, and to work with all the Muslim organization, the Muslim people, and to take in consideration when they're making their policies the interest of the Arab people beside the governments, because at the long run, people, they're going to run whatever it is in any other country, whether the Arab countries or the Muslim countries, and we don't need to create any more hostile governments in the world for our government here or our country here than we have already. And we don't want to have Israel to lead our foreign policy and dictate the foreign policy from Jerusalem. And that's not American. It's un-American. America has to look for its interest, regardless whichever country they're dealing with.
I think that the shape of the future Middle East and the future American policy in the Middle East is in the hands of the people in the region and over here. It can't be that people can wait for others to do it for them, but they have to have a sense of their own agency and to realize their own potential capabilities. If they are to rise to this occasion, the time to do it is now, because if people wait too much longer, these new realities are going to become entrenched and impossible to change. So I guess I would just leave with that.
A lot of courage. It requires a lot of determination, but also with that goes the integrity of it and the truth of it. The American Jews who can see the fallacious and the absurd elements of Zionism, they have to take a stand before it is too late. Unfortunately, in history, when it becomes too late, the backlash cannot be reversed. And it is extremely important for these elements to come out and speak up against the excesses and the injustices of Zionism, instead of keeping it an in-house argument in which they, among themselves, debate the positives and the negatives of this whole Zionist issue. That is one element that has to surface sooner rather than later, before it is too late. The other element that has to come out is that American officialdom, even though it has been balking, due to the insistence and the obsession of the Zionists in a hostile attitude towards political Islam, American officials have to come to their senses, bypass this Zionist malignancy in the decision-making process in this government, and come to their senses and say, political Islam has been a fact of Middle Eastern life, at least for the past decade and a half. Its momentum is increasing. We should begin to see it for what it is, objectively and factually. And if that is the case, we have to reach some type of a communication with the representatives of this political Islam in the area. And then finally, I would like to say that as far as the Islamic groups are concerned, and they are mushrooming here and there, these Islamic groups have to shed and have to also expose the Arab governments in particular that are financing them. They have to be as bold enough, as courageous as it takes to be independent of these Arab governments. And if such a climate is fostered, then I think it would be possible to avoid some type of apocalyptic clash that is in the making, and we will be able to overcome our historical residuals and the contemporary injustices. Short of that, if no action is taken along these three courses, we will continue to knock heads against each other. There will be more, unfortunately and regrettably, there will be more bloodshed in the area. The demographics of that area, history has been in and out of the Holy Land, and the final word belongs to the population, the overwhelming population of that area, which in our times happens to be an Islamic population.
I see a connection between hope and the bad things that may happen. I believe, as a Muslim, very strongly in justice. I don't think justice in the long run can be defeated. In the long run, nobody gets dealt with unjustly. And the more bad things that happen, the more motivation there will be for people to rally together. I don't think that the American public, I agree with what Brother Muhammad said, I think the American public is made up of good people with good motivations and largely not aware of what's going on. And as more bad things happen, they will become more and more aware. When Sheikh Abdul Rahman was arrested, very few people spoke out. When Dr. Abu Marzouk was arrested, some people spoke out. When Stephen Emerson wrote a scurrilous article in the Wall Street Journal accusing the heads of UASR and American Muslim Council of being terrorists, many people spoke out, including even a Zionist who had a letter to the editor published saying this was ridiculous and had gone too far. So as things get worse, more and more people are going to speak out, and a point may be reached where the Arab Americans and the Muslim Americans discover that identity of interests I talked about, so that we will be forced to rally together, and when we present our case clearly and articulately to the American people, they will be on the side of justice. I believe that.
Yeah, I think someone was calling on some American Jews to be courageous and to say what ought to be said. I think one of those people has written a piece today, in fact, in the Washington Times. Bruce Fine, whose father is Jewish, and I happen to actually be meeting this guy tomorrow without even knowing that he's going to have this piece. The piece is under the title Double Standard, and it's a very, very, very powerful piece, bringing out the inadequacies, the one-sidedness of U.S. policy with regard to Arabs, with regard to Islam. Very, very good piece. I really would like you and if people that watch this program can get and to read it. And I think it is important, the fact that he talked about the double standard in the United States. I believe, well, one can maybe easily or easier able to understand why Israel itself may want to do some of the things it is doing or it has been doing. It is much, much more difficult for me as an American citizen to really try to understand, and I don't think there is a way to understand, why the United States, without really going into politics, because we've discussed the whys, just in summary, it is difficult for me to understand why our government is so one-sided, is so much takes all Arabs and Muslims for granted, as if they really don't exist, as if whatever you do to them, they will take it tomorrow, they will forget it. It's wrong to assume that. And I think, and I'm not calling on any Arabs to respond in whichever ways, or Muslims to respond in whichever ways, but so long as they are social beings, human beings, there is a limit to how much they are able and willing to take before they begin to react. And I hope someone will take note of such things.
I'm Mark Bruzonsky. Thank all of you for coming today, and thank all of you for watching our program.